We lived on the ranch with my family until around 1985. At that time, the Irvine Ranch had been sold, I believe, to developers. So the actual agricultural component had kind of abated quite a bit. And it should really start with my father, Juan Salas Mesa, who came from Valparaiso, Zacatecas, Mexico. He initially came to be part of the Irvine Ranch through the Bracero Program. So they would contract men in Mexico itself proper, and then they would send them to different farms all over the United States. And they could last anywhere from a few months to 6 to 8 months, the contracts, depending on the farm they were going to, the kind of work they were going to do, and you know, how long they needed them for. It was not a very well-run program. Most of the men had very bad experiences. A lot of their money was stolen from them, primarily from here and from Mexico as well. And they were treated really just not very well. Some of them had places to live, others didn't. The food was usually substandard. So it wasn't a very well-run program, but these men needed the money. And thousands of them came. Where my father's from Zacatecas actually sent the majority of braceros to the United States at one time. But in essence, his last contract was with the Irvine Ranch, the Irvine Company, and I believe it was in 1959 when he first came to the ranch. And at that time, the farmers kept lobbying to have the program extended because it was, you know, cost effective for them because it was, in essence, cheap labor. So what the ranch did is, since they already have this group of men here, they decided to keep them. So at that time, immigration was much easier. It was just a letter from an employer. You would take it to the embassy, so they would be able to get the green card, basically, so that they would be allowed to stay and work. So, so this group of men, I don't know how many they were, but I just remember growing up with all these gentlemen, because they eventually had families, and because we all lived on the ranch, and they all stayed. Because I went to Berkeley, and I had come down for a weekend just to see the family, and I was just chatting with my dad, and I asked him, I said, "Papá, ¿era usted un bracero? You know, were you a bracero at one time?" And he said, "Sí, yo era." And I asked him, you know, ¿me puede escribir su historia? Basically, could you write it for me? And, you know, I left a few days later. My mom said, you know, he sat at the kitchen table and just wrote and wrote and wrote. He just spent there hours just writing. And she eventually sent it to me, mailed it to me. He just took like a yellow legal pad and just wrote and wrote his entire story. And it was at that time, because at that point I knew nothing about his family. I knew he was from Zacatecas, and that was about it. And in that, he started off with his grandparents' names, his parents' names, all of his siblings' names, including their birthdays, and just started telling me how, and just started talking about being, but that was as far as he went with that. Then he started talking about when he first got in the program and where he ended up, what kind of work it was, how bad they were treated. It's funny, I've seen with a lot of these gentlemen, none of them like mayonnaise. Because they would feed them just bologna sandwiches or with mayonnaise. So my dad never wanted mayonnaise in anything, and I've talked to other gentlemen, they're like, no mayonnaise. I thought that was pretty interesting that they kind of had a shared story like that. But overall, he really just talked about, you know, his time, some of the places he were, and, you know, and how they were treated. But again, I think he felt being on the ranch because even though, yes, it was farm labor, it was still hard agrarian work, they were still treated well. And so he got lucky in that regard, that he was able to end up at a place like the Irvine Ranch. And in there, he talked about what it was like to be a bracero and a farm worker, but when he came to the part about Irvine, he just glowed. He just loved talking about what a great place it was to work. You know, again, it was still farm work, but they treated them so well. So he was always very proud of having worked for Irvine. When he passed away, my sister and I, can I show? This was his jacket when he worked there. He was so proud of this jacket. He always wore it. You know, it had his name on it, J. Salas, and this was the insignia for the Irvine Ranch. So a lot of people who know the area know this, you know, because a lot of the farmers had stickers on their car, it just said Irvine Ranch on it. So he was very proud to have worked there because he knew how lucky he was in many ways to have been able to work in a place like that.